Welcome back to another episode of the Thunderstock Show. It's a collection of valuable brainstorms to enhance your life, liberty, and pursuit of property. This season's all about the EOS journey, and who better to have than Byron Attridge. Byron, I hope your sister appreciates me pronouncing the last name. We had a little bit of banter off camera. So first and foremost, how are things going in the great state of Texas?
Austin is doing great. I mean, there are a lot of people in the city that lament the amount of growth that's happened over the past 25 years. I've been here for about almost 26 years, and but I don't lament it at all. I think this is an awesome town. I'm really excited to be here. It's always been fun. Great entrepreneurial spirit, nice young kind of feeling town and everything. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and I go back and visit a lot, but I love Austin. Austin's my vibe.
I've been to Texas for business over the last several years. I call it 4 or 5 times, something like that. And I've been to Austin, and I just think Austin might be my number 1 or number 2 favorite city in the country. What do you think about Austin makes it so special?
It seems to have just this unique mix of conservative and progressive kind of, people and ideas. I feel like that the city itself attracts a very entrepreneurial spirited kind of individual, and that those individuals tend to be more open about who they associate with and the views that they take in. Entrepreneurs are experimenters by nature, and for that reason, they tend to be more open-minded. And so that's the vibe I think that comes to this city, and that's why it feels right to me. It's my kind of peeps.
Where I'm from in South Central Pennsylvania is great. It's the Amish capital, probably of the world, definitely of the country. Breadbasket, great food farms, all that, great place to raise a family. But I have several friends and colleagues that have become entrepreneurs and moved to Austin, which is one of the pulls for me going there. They said they're like, hey, I love being in Austin, except for maybe some of the hottest months of the summer, and then I'll come back home. But man, it's transformative, right? For both their business, their personality. And then you see people, I think people can learn something from who's the top of any given field, right? There's like success leaves clues. And then you see one of the wealthiest people in the world, definitely in the country, Elon Musk, moving to West Austin. And then you see Joe Rogan, who's the number 1 podcaster on the planet, moving to Austin. And it's just like success can breed further success. So I think the
Yeah,
environment just attracts that type of folk.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a culture that thrives on innovation and just trying to get in there and see if we can solve some problems.
So you said you're from Georgia. What led you to Austin, to Texas?
Yes. Well, so after college, I worked in, we're sort of was, still based out of Atlanta for quite a while, but I took up a job with Coca-Cola was my first real job, and it was a gift. It was, a friend of my father's who worked for Coca-Cola that gave me a job. I was a philosophy major, right? And so, you know, here I am coming out in 1991 back in the Stone Age, and we didn't have really internet to rely on or anything like that. It was like, hey, you took the first job that somebody gifted you. And so I took this job, and they quickly shipped me down to Mexico. And I was working with a team that was launching new packaging out into the marketplace, so they had deregulated packaging in the we were going down there in order to do these product launching parties all around Mexico. So there's no dirt town in Mexico that I haven't been to. And it was a really neat experience and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I love doing that and all that kind of stuff. And then I went to work for W.W. Granger. And after about 10 years between the two of them, I just got really, really frustrated with the bureaucracy of big corporate and started saying, okay, well, I need to cut a path toward being an entrepreneur. And I went off to grad school. at Thunderbird to get an international MBA. And when I came, lo and behold, while I was there, I met a girl and chased her out to Austin after grad school. And that just happened to be during the dot-com boom. And so that was heady days here. It was a really exciting time to be here. And so I showed up to visit her one weekend, and after having too many beers and being out on the boat, somebody asked me, "Hey, why don't you come work for us?" And I was like, "Sure." So that's what got me to Austin.
Man, that's a wild story. I want to touch base on the college days. So I was also a philosophy major in college.
Oh yeah?
And oh yeah, absolutely. Small liberal arts school, and
What school did you go to?
I went to Elizabethtown College in
Yeah,
Pennsylvania.
yeah,
Yeah.
excellent.
So part of the reason behind that was I grew up, had a buddy who was really excellent baseball player, and would go and watch some of his games, played high level at the local stadium, and I met his father a couple times just from growing up being a buddy, and he always sat alone right behind the home plate with a ray gun and was super calculative. And I was like, "What's up with that?" He goes, "Oh, he's a physics professor." So he's a physics professor at E-Town. And then I did some research, learned more. It's like, wow, he's really a big deal as a physics professor. He's doing some pretty cool stuff. And then, so I wanted to take, that was a pull. Plus I was into sports. I always wanted to be a English teacher and wrestling coach. I kind of do that now as a fractional CMO in a weird way,
Yeah.
non-bureaucratic. And halfway through, I was like, teaching is not it. You learn in corporate, the bureaucracy, I just couldn't handle the structure of modern education. So then I was like, well, I'm going to just go do what I like, philosophy, and never ask the question how to make money, but definitely ask every other question. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So how did you get into philosophy, and why did you choose that major?
Oh wow. So when I was in high school, when I was starting high school in ninth grade, my my mom dove headlong into fundamentalist Christianity, and I went from being most favored child to demon child, kind of overnight. And in my zeal to try to sort out why this all had happened and what I actually believed in and whatever else, I was like, I'm going to figure this out. So I went and became a philosophy major.
And what did you? Okay, so was there a focus on religious studies, or was it just broad? Was it Western thought?
No,
What
I mean, it was
focus?
everything. I was like, hey, open up the floodgates. I want everything because I need to figure out where I land in this. Where do I belong? Because I don't feel like I belong. After mom did that, that was really kind of disconcerting for me. Whereas before I had felt like I kind of had a place, I all of a sudden was like, I don't think I do anymore. And so
Mm.
I I her version of Christianity was really, relatively offensive to me. And so that being the case, I was repulsed by that and ran away from Christianity for years. And my mom and I couldn't stay in the same room for years.
Mm.
And then as I went through kind of college and did philosophy and all that kind of stuff, I started centering in on what I did actually believe in, and then was kind of reintroduced to Christianity in a way by, in fact, you probably know of him, Andy Stanley out of Atlanta. Went to one of his sermons and he brought it back to me in a way that really landed, which was it only I mean, there's only one thing, and the one thing is love one another the way that I loved you. And I was like, wait a minute, if that's what it is, that's me. That I want that, and I want to pursue that because that sounds like something I can get behind. And so that brought me back to Christianity and my own life and faith and whatnot, and has kind of set the tone, not kind of, but set the tone for the rest of my adult life.
I will tell you that, similar to you, there were some instances in my development, like my adolescence, teenage years, where I just saw people around me, in my community, pretty faith-based area where I grew up, pretty Christian area, that they just did things and the acts were so it just felt like so hypocritical. Like when you think of using the Lord's name in vain, like I could tell you story after story growing up of people that, were either in the church or surrounded by the church that just repulsed me from institutional. But then I was sitting in a class on J.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis.
Yeah.
And talk about timeless classics for good reason.
Oh yeah.
And I met some of my dearest friends in that class, and then we ended up living in the same housing place, and they were studying for their doctorate of divinity eventually, and then later got their PhD in Christian history. And it just brought me back. It was like, you could have all these bad examples, but like you just need to meet one person that the message hits. And I familiar with Occam's razor.
Absolutely. William of Ockham.
Yeah, good. I talked to another philosophy major in the EOS community, and he's like, "Oh, William of Ockham." I'm like, you got to get your degree back. You need to learn Occam's razor. But how do you feel like these times? Because we'll touch on this later, and we talked about it all off camera. You had some instances where, like the corporate thing where you figured out this bureaucracy is not for me. You had to go and take a sabbatical, reflect. Like, how do you feel like through the lens of philosophy and trying to get the best answer, which is that takes into consideration all the facts, but being most concise and simple, like helps you to navigate, times where you need the clarity break for more than a day or an hour?
Yeah.
Like, I want to hear some stories about that.
Yeah. So let's talk about it at a high level first. I mean, at the end of the day, so I told you about the corporate part of the beginning of my adult life after college and the first jobs and all that kind of stuff. And that frustration, what I did is I mistakenly conflated discipline with bureaucracy. Now, bureaucracy is a form of discipline that's kind of discipline in concrete. Not very flexible, not very fungible, not very agile, right? That's where the frustration was in me. Plus, I was in my 20s and full of piss and vinegar and really thought I knew better than everybody else, right? And so I threw out the discipline. I was like, that's too confining. I'm creative, right? I'm a creative problem solver and whatever else. And so, that was kind of the impetus for pursuing entrepreneurship. Once I got into entrepreneurship in my first venture, it almost killed me. Really. I mean, to be quite honest, I made it successful, but my first entrepreneurial venture in 2003, it began in 2003, really after 4.5 years of it, it took a really heavy toll on my life, my health, my marriage, everything. Because I didn't have that discipline. And I was really just trying to muscle my way through and bludgeon my way through to success. And, even after that, I sold it off, made a pot full of money and whatever else, was going to take a sabbatical for 8 or 10 months, right?
Right.
And then all of a sudden, 3 months in, I'm getting all the calls from everybody like, hey, what if we did this? What if we did this? What if we did this? And then 3 months in, I started another one. So my 8-month sabbatical turned into 3. I dove right in, started that one, and it had a meteoric rise to success, but then it imploded epically, right? So that was an epic failure. And I'm like licking my wounds in the wake of that. And a friend and fellow entrepreneur approached me about orchestrating a turnaround of a 15-year-old stagnant services business that he had purchased. I was like, well, I'm flattered that you want me, but why me? I just ran one into the ground, and you know that. And he said, yeah, in a word, values. And I was like, okay. Again, I'm flattered you like my values, but how are we going to turn this thing around? And he said, you got everything you need, Byron. You got drive, skill, mad skills, a lot of know-how and all that kind of stuff. You got great values, but you're just lacking a framework. And he pushed over a copy of Traction, and he goes, go read that and then come back and talk to me. And so I started, that was a Wednesday afternoon. I started reading it that afternoon, about 2 hours in. Bing. I was like, oh my God. All that I threw out with the bureaucracy was the discipline. And at the end of the day, the discipline is the path. It's the path to freedom. So that was the kind of aha turning point in my life and my career as far as that goes. And I went back in literally 2 days later. I read the book in 2 days and went back in and said, look, if you'll have me, I want to do this with you. And we took it from about $2.5 million a year all the way to 10 million in annual recurring revenue in a handful of years. And then I exited. I was like, I got the itch, and I was like, yeah, thank you, and this was great and everything, but you and I gotta go. I got to go start some things. And so I started businesses running them on EOS subsequent to that, and it had just been really, really powerful for me as a framework for achieving what I wanted to achieve in business and not killing myself doing it. Because, before I felt like I was getting ground out in an ashtray like a cigarette butt, 60, 70, 80, sometimes 80 hours a week and stuff like that. And it's just not sustainable. But the reality
if you
is,
want to have a holistic life with a wife and time
totally.
for your health and all the other stuff.
Yeah, so EOS really it worked for me. And so I naturally started evangelizing it. And, then eventually people started calling me and asking me, hey, can you help us out? And I was like, well, sure. And then EOS called me and said, hey, you want to be an implementer? And I was like, I never thought about it, but I sure do have a whole lot of fun doing that on the side. Maybe I should do it for real. But why did I get the impression you're about to tell me I'm doing it wrong? And Barb Yiki, who was the person from the EOS Worldwide that called me, she laughed and she was like, well, there is a better way. And then she showed me what the professional implementation track looked like and what it would take to get certified and all that kind of stuff. So I laced up immediately. I was like, yeah, lace me up. I know this is going to be right. It was kind of one of those God moments where I really felt like that was put in front of me at that time for a reason. And that was 5.5 years ago, and I haven't looked back since. I've never had this much fun working. I've never had as much fun because you know what the juice is, Ross? The juice is seeing the impact that it has on people's lives. It's great to see their businesses get better and all that kind of stuff. And clearly that is a primary objective. But when they come to you 10 months in or however long it is with tears in their eyes saying, I don't know how to thank you. That's the juice. That's really what it's all about. That's what's fun.
Couldn't agree more. There's so many places where I could say within your story, like I can have a parallel relation, but the one that is probably the most impactful counter story to tell you is, scaling a company to 8 figures from kind of nothing and working really hard. That's great. Like learning all this stuff, but having someone that worked for you that you really respect, that you think that you made the right hire, it, right? Yeah. Pluses across the board, culture fit across the board, and then above and beyond, like anything you could ask for. And they call you back 3 years after you exit that company. And I get a call and says, hey, I'm like, hey, is everything okay? Everything wrong? He goes, yeah, life's great. I'm going to have my second child. I just got a new job making twice as much as I ever did before. They love my background. I interviewed great. Like, life's great. And he goes, I just want to thank you, man, because the opportunity and you believed in me. Now I can support my family of 4. My wife doesn't have to worry about bills. Like that to me, if I had to say like why I like doing what I'm doing and like the output of EOS is like that phone call.
That's exactly right. It's the same. I mean, it's the impact on people's lives. That's it.
Yeah.
Because people. One of the things that you had kind of prompted me for ahead of this interview and whatnot was, hey, what would you say to your 80-year-old self or 8-year-old self and all that kind of stuff? And it's like the reality is that what would I say to my 8-year-old self is, hey, at the end of the day, figure out where you can have a positive impact on the lives of the people around you. That's it. Find that. And when you find that, you found what you need to be doing. That's your calling.
I think that's so important to highlight because everyone has something, they have their own unique gift or unique strength, as Dan Sullivan would call it.
Yeah,
But not everyone finds it, and that might be one of the most sad things about reality.
totally.
You've mentioned through your stories today and kind of offline prompts that you've had material success in some of your business ventures, but it was crushing you. It just, and then you call it like they were material success, but you call them like epic failures. What about those experiences were epic failures, and what do those failures teach you? Because I firmly stand on, you show me a man or woman that has never failed, and I'll show you someone who's never achieved or learned or done anything worth note.
Without question. And to dovetail onto that, I think that one of the things I think is one of the great truths of our existence is that true growth and true character development does not happen when things are comfortable. When everything's up and to the right, that's not when it happens. When the dot-com bust happened, right? Those were heady days here in Austin. It was really cool and it was fun and it was exciting. Everybody's making boatloads of money and all that kind of stuff. But when it crumbled is when you really saw what people were made of. And I learned some of the most valuable lessons of my entire life when the proverbial SHIT hit the fan. And that's the crucible, as it were, that gets you to that point where you're asking the questions of yourself: who am I? What do I stand for? What are the things that I value most? Because when everything's up and to the right, it's easy to make good decisions. It's when you're under duress and you're under pressure, and you don't have a lot of good information and all that kind of stuff and everything. What are you going to do then? What do you lean on? You've got to get back to first principles. And that's what that core values piece in EOS is really so important for, is just to get back to what matters to me more than anything else, because that's what's going to guide me in my decision making.
You hit something that I was journaling about recently, and it's the difference between faith and certainty. They can't really exist in the same at the same time, right? So if someone requires certainty, then there's no room for faith, because faith is a belief that a desired outcome may or will, believe that it will occur despite of the current lack of evidence, or the knowing, the certainty. And then certainty is like, oh, this will happen. But I think that the quote, God plans, man laughs, really applies. And the times where I was up and to the right and I was certain that this is, great, then something happens. It's like a hard left turn, and everything I thought I knew as I was younger just blows up, and it was not what I know. But then the older I get, the more I just try to lean on faith, be like, you know what? I believe XYZ. I don't know how, when, or why, but I'm going to take the appropriate steps to do it within my control.
Well, absolutely.
How does faith interplay with entrepreneurship in your POV?
I think
I'm saying macro, not just religious faith.
Yeah. I think that people like to, especially people in the United States, they like to kind of compartmentalize their lives a bit. And I think it doesn't necessarily serve people well when they do it to the degree that it's kind of like, hey, I've got this life in business, and now I've got this personal life, and then maybe even compartmentalize your life of faith. And I don't like it all that way. I look at it as a big soup. It's all part of the same thing. It's all part of the same, whole that really deserves to be treated as a whole. And if you don't look at the work that you do through your worldview, through your framework and whatever else, and you have one framework for business and one framework for personal, maybe even a third for faith, that dog don't hunt. Because then essentially you're using a different set of principles in your work than you do in your personal life, than you do in your faith life. And I look at it all together and I say, okay, well, I'm going to use the same principles across every part of my life. And that's how I think that, faith intersects with my work life, is that it's just part of my life.
Yeah.
And I don't say that I won't do business with friends or family or whatever else. Of course I will. I love doing business with friends and family and all that kind of stuff because I use the same set of principles all the way across. It's the people that use different sets of principles and core values in different areas that compartmentalize and say, hey, no, I can't do business with somebody that's friends and family because that might go sideways, that might go bad and whatever else. And I just I don't look at it that way. I think there have to be, in order for you to be happy and feel fulfilled as a human being over time, I think you have to integrate those.
One of the things that you mentioned earlier is that when Christianity specifically was simplified for you, which is like love thy neighbor, love thy as you love thyself, or as God would love you. Just like
Yeah.
universal application of like the first principle. Part of that is, we mentioned offline, like having grace, like forgiveness and understanding and patience. But then the concept in Christianity specifically is sanctification, where you spend your life trying, like just working towards being better. And your answer to the question of the 80 and 8-year-old self, I love for you to put into words, but the one word that comes out for both of that answer is sanctification, right? Like you're just continually trying, like each day, to be better than you were the day before and leave the world a better place than when you came in.
Yeah, and that is really, in my estimation, if you're not growing and learning, you're dying.
Yeah.
And to a certain degree, we all are dying, but you're not truly living, I guess, is the way to look at it, unless you're growing and learning, is what I call becoming. Okay, and I don't think that anybody stops if they're truly living. If you're truly living, you are becoming until the day you die. And so, the second part of the question is like, hey, what would you say to your 8-year-old self? Yeah, well, I'm trying to become the best person I can be and the leader that I wish I had. So, you know, uh, so for talking to the 80-year-old me, I would be like, hey, those are the things that are important to me. What advice would you give me looking back from 80 years? That's what I would say to the 80-year-old self. We talked about the 8-year-old self. It's like, hey, give yourself some grace and understand that you're always going to be becoming and that your life work is that. But the 80-year-old is the opposite end of that. And, hey, tell me what I'm not seeing. What have I not learned yet? Because I'm not going to fool anybody into believing that I've learned everything.
Yeah, youth is wasted on the young. I think that frame is really. It's the first time I've heard that answer framed the way that you did, but it's like, hey, this is 8-year-old self. This is the path. These are the conditions that you need to meet, which is continually becoming. And 80-year-old self, how do I get better at continually becoming?
What am I not seeing that you've already seen?
Yeah, like necessary conditions set. You got to get better, 8-year-old self, and you will. 80-year-old self, what are some of the ways that you've seen down the road that I could get better faster, or I'm missing currently, I don't see now? And I think that the thought exercise is fun because it applies to everybody, and if you use those guideposts of like, hey, don't forget why you started, but also remember to reflect and look back and say, what can I do differently? Because I don't think experience, insofar as just raw experience, is the best teacher. I think reflecting on your experience and then learning, taking the time, now the
Totally.
coffee break, and pause and learn.
Yeah, win or learn. And this has some hallmarks of an analog to the work that I do, obviously, because at the end of the day, what I'm trying to impart to clients is, hey, let's see if we can shortcut some of the woes that you have been experiencing and everything, because I've been through these and I know this works. So if it resonates with you, I'll teach you how to do it. And on top of that, as we start navigating all this, I'm going to show you where some of those pitfalls are that I fell into so that potentially you can avoid them. You know, they're not always going to avoid them because it's an interesting psychological dynamic. You can tell people all day long, watch out for this, watch out for this, watch out for this. And in some cases, not all cases, but in some cases, it just doesn't hit until it hits them. And so they're like, well, yeah, but, and then all of a sudden the same problem plagues them, and they're like, oh, that's what you were talking about.
We discussed that storytelling as a mechanism for teaching is a very powerful way to, it's one thing to, tell someone what to do. It's a different thing to teach someone how to do something. What are some of the stories, whether they're the wins or the lessons, the wins or the learns, that have taught you some of the 10x multiplier lessons? And what were those lessons?
Well, that's a good question. I think that the biggest lesson I've kind of already alluded to, or touched on, and that was the idea that, well, I'll wrap up two concepts in this answer. One is the idea that, hey, at the end of the day, what you got to realize is that the discipline is the path to freedom. So if you can manage to figure out some way, and I use EOS because it's worked for me and all that kind of stuff, there are plenty of ways and frameworks out there to achieve discipline and focus. Because that's what all we're trying to do. All we're trying to do is get some human beings together and get them all paddling in the same direction, right? Channel human energy. That's really what EOS is designed to do. That's in essence, in a nutshell, what it does. And there are other ways to do it, but EOS is just, I've found, has been a really simple and elegant way to achieve it. The other piece of that digs a little bit deeper into it is, one of the things that was a real aha for me and kind of a 10x kind of concept for me was, when things aren't going the way you want them to go, that's just an issue. And the issues are that path. That's the path. So don't cuss at them. Don't be pissed off and whatever else. I call it the Kenny Rogers principle, and it's not no one to hold them, no one to fold them. I call it Kenny Rogers principle because every hand is a winner and every hand is a loser.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And what I'm saying about that is that life is going to, and the world is going to deal you what it deals you, and you have absolutely no control over that. What you do have control over is whether you're going to play the hand and how you play it.
How you play the hand.
So, are you going to play the hand to win? Or are you going to fold? What it comes down to, because if you're going to fold, then you surrender to the issues. You go, that's too much. If you're going to succeed, the path is through those issues squarely, and you're going to have to figure them out. So love them, and that shift in mentality will 10x you. That in and of itself, if you can manage to make the shift. A lot of people have a hard time, doing that. They just continue to feel like that the world is imposing all these terrible things on them. Yet at the same time, I'm like, well, you got dealt lemons. Let's make some lemonade.
Discipline equals freedom. The obstacle is the way. Stoicism, it's like 101. Control without what you can control. It's not the cards you're dealt, it's how you play the hand. All of these things, ring true for people like you and I that have studied philosophy and really done the work there. But one caveat to that is, I listened to a podcast or a story from an entrepreneur that I admire and look up to, and he goes, the story was such that he's jealous of people that, whether you want to call it like the DEI, the disadvantaged or marginalized groups, or
Mhm.
people that have gone through harder times, because he goes, your opportunity to tell an epic story from the comeback of overcoming obstacles. He goes, I grew up in upper middle class. Like I never, struggled for money, but the people that grew up broke, that made their money, I'll never be able to have that rise, that degree of overcoming, because his life was less challenging. It was imposed suffering, not overcoming, obstacles. And that framework kind of reminds me of what you're talking about as well, where it's like, hey, it depends on how you look at the cards, man. Like you could be at a huge advantage with all the shit you've gone through. I'll tell you one last story on this tangent, and then I'll ask you another question. It's, when I started this business, I had already thought that I was like, I successfully scaled something from 0 to 10. I made my first exit. I've
Oh
got it
yeah.
figured out. I have it all figured out, right? I thought I did.
And then you got punched in the mouth.
And then, yeah, literally. And then, as I'm starting this, I have a newborn child, which was one of the reasons where I had that come to Jesus, where I was like, I got to make a change, right? Don't want to lose the family. Now it's like a lot different. Stakes are raised. I want to be there as a husband and father. And I guess I had to learn this lesson that within 90 days, I lost my godmother, so my closest aunt, lost my grandmother, and it was her time. And I lost my mother. She got killed in a drunk driver in the middle of the day, hit her and
Oh
killed her
my
instantly.
God. Oh my God.
And that was within 90 days of me, like my first quarter of starting the
Mm, mm,
business.
mm.
And I tore my ACL like in that same time
Oh
frame
my
either way.
God.
So I literally had to speak at 2 funerals for the, other than my wife and daughter, but for the majority of my life, the women I love the most. Speak at 2 funerals, couldn't walk, like didn't know when the revenue's coming in. And I look back at it, I'm like, if I tell people, I'm not afraid to talk to anyone, because I had to get in front of 300 people at my mom's funeral as the first person to speak and organize the whole thing. You think the sales calls stress me out? Like it's a
Yeah.
joke. But that's the blessing, I think. And you only get that if you go through something shitty like that. Excuse my
Well,
French.
yeah, no, 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 no. I'm right there with you. It's, there are all kinds of expressions that kind of capture that, in the sense that, you're going to have trouble. You're going to have troubles, and it's going to come, and the way you field it is everything. That's it. That's 100% it. Because when you think about what life is about, as we talked about before, it's going to show up the way it shows up. And you cannot control that. Can you control? It's the way you show up and the way you respond. And if you respond with, I'm angry and I'm pissed off and I can't stand, the way this is and whatever else, and all you do is sit there and cuss and bitch, then you're not going to go anywhere. Now, I'm not saying that I
You're
don't
wasting
get
energy.
upset.
You're
Oh
wasting
yeah,
human energy.
true. But I'm not saying I don't get upset about things and all that kind of stuff. And when things don't work out the way I want, sure I do. But, once you've said your piece and you've experienced the anger, let it go. There's a great 2-minute video that Jocko Willink has. It's called Good.
Mm.
I encourage anybody that's watching this to go look it up on YouTube. Just search Jocko Willink Good. And one of the most powerful expressions of this concept that I've ever seen in my entire life. He's like, didn't get the promotion? Good. It gives me time to sharpen my sword and to hone my skills and get it better the next time. Didn't get the requested, equipment that we needed? Good. We're going to have to get creative and figure out how we're going to get this done with what we've got. I mean, if you can lean into that concept, then it will serve you massively well in
It's the
every
opposite.
endeavor.
It's the opposite of toxic positivity, which I think is a plague across the country today,
Totally.
where people are
Totally.
just like, it's not that they're optimistic because they're confronting reality. They're just blissfully ignorant of, like, I'm just going to ignore problems. And it's like, that's to me like a spiritual form of drug addiction.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I mean, Simon Sinek puts it very well. He's like, look, being an optimist is not about ignoring the fact that there are problems and issues and all that kind of stuff. It's the belief, and you asked about the convergence. Well, the
Yeah.
faith,
Faith.
the convergence between your work life and work, it's the faith that you have the ability to address this, to make your way through it, to paddle your way through and figure out what will get you to the other side. That's it.
Amen. I I ask a question to you, and I want to frame it. I ask you, what's one challenge if you could solve and make the most significant impact? And you start off with saying that your life's work is teaching people how to communicate and work as a healthy team more effectively with care and grace. It's hard and it takes time and resources. But how do you approach overcoming that challenge and solving that to make the impact you want to? What's your approach?
So my approach is first and foremost patience, because to anybody with kids knows that human beings, it takes a really long time for them to actually internalize any kind of lesson that they've learned, either through experience or by somebody trying to teach them. And so, in the EOS community, we always talk about, it's at least 7 times. If you tell somebody, the first 3 times, that you told somebody, hey, this is the way it's done, and whatever else, and they're not quite getting it, whatever else, and you're frustrated and pissed off and whatever, because they're not getting it, take a deep breath, because you got 4 more times to go. But you can't deliver that with a hammer or a club or whatever else. You can't just beat them over the head with it. You gotta do it with kindness and care and grace. You have to do it in a way that cares about them, and say, hey, look, I understand. Talk to me about why you're doing it that way. And then they tell you, and you say, okay, I understand where you're coming from, and that makes sense and everything. Let me talk to you about maybe a different way of looking at it and approaching it that might be helpful to you. And being able to do that and show up for that the 5th, 6th, 7th time or more, it takes time, energy, and focus and care. You have to care about the people and the success, because where it goes off the rails is when you are only concerned with the outcome. You have to be concerned with the people. The people in the equation are the most important. And so what you're trying to do is facilitate that person's success in this environment, in this set of circumstances, as opposed to, I have to orchestrate this outcome. And when you do that, you're developing the people. And Simon Sinek talks about it a lot, with an example called a company called Barry Waymiller. And these guys make huge CPG machines. They package yogurt and package all kinds of things, and massive machines and whatever else. You ask the CEO of Barry Waymiller what they produce, and he goes, the best leaders on the planet. You're like, you make equipment. No. We produce the best leaders on the planet. So what does that tell you? That tells you that this is about caring about people and teaching people how to be successful in given situations. And so when you're doing that, it takes time, energy, dollars, investment, resources, all those kinds of things. And you have to be patient enough and thoughtful enough and caring enough to invest those things in that person's success, because that's what's enduring and lasting. That creates sustainable success, as opposed to, hey, I got to the outcome. And these people were laid waste doing it, and I clubbed them over the head, and I was like, get your effing shit together and whatever else, and get your job done. And so we got to the goal, and I burned the people. Guess what? Now they're gone. They're like, all right, we made it there, but I can't do this anymore. I'm out of here. I'm going to go somewhere where they treat me better. Okay? So what have you gained by doing that? Yeah, you got to the outcome, but you burned the people, and that doesn't lead to success. So
Not
if
sustainable, short
no, it's
term
not.
too.
I mean, the things that I teach at a high level really come down to three elements: vision, traction, and healthy.
Yeah.
The vision part is getting everybody in that organization 100% on the same page about where you're headed and how you're going to get there. And when they are actually on board and they actually believe in what you're doing, they will go to the ends of the earth for you. Okay, that's the inspirational part and the motivational part of the equation. The traction part is the discipline part. It's making sure that you're executing on that vision, top to bottom. Everybody in the organization is executing on that vision with discipline and accountability, day in and day out. Just making 3 or 4 yards on every play.
3 hours in a
You're
cloud of
moving
dust.
the chains.
Yeah.
Okay, because you don't have to make 50 yards. Just make 4. Okay, if you make 4 on every play, you will win. And then the healthy part is a lot of what I was referring to in the investment. So you have to get people to work together as a healthy, cohesive group of people that actually enjoy pursuing this vision together. Because most of the time you're not. That's the reality of these entrepreneurial organizations is that they're so objective oriented and that they forget about what's going to get you there. What's going to get you there is investing in the people.
I'm going to
Does
make
that
a
make
really
sense?
100%. It makes me think of this story going back to Tolkien and using Lord of the Rings as an example. Tolkien absolutely detested Dune from Frank Herbert, the sci-fi.
Oh,
He detested
really?
Frank Herbert's work. He got along with C.S. Lewis, they were buds, but then he would probably, from that same logic, absolutely abhor any Game of Thrones or George R. R. Martin. And the reason being is because the protagonists, the characters there, they always acted with the end in mind. So using Game of Thrones popular reference, everyone was trying to take action towards, how do I ascend to power, right? It's like the end result justifies the
The
means to
means.
get there. And Tolkien's worldview and his story was like, look, you do the right thing along the way. There's a plan, like the outcome will happen. You're not going to know it. So had Bilbo not spared Gollum for the ring in the beginning, Gollum wouldn't have wrestled that ring into the mountain, and everyone ended up exactly where they were supposed to be because they abided by their nature of who they were. And like, I think that story the means are the end in of itself, right? The journey is the way. Like doing the right thing along the way
Ooh, I
is the
like
way.
that. I like that. I think you touched on something that I'm going to use. I'm going to steal that from you. The
Please
the
do.
the means are what's important. How you go about what you do makes all the difference in the world. And we're experiencing this a lot in our current moment in here
Yeah, yeah.
in the US of A, where it's like, okay, well, what's most important? Is the objective most important? And we just lay waste to everything in between here and there. Okay, well, all right, that's one way to go about it. Or if the way matters, then you have to go about it and do it the right way in order to get there. It takes longer almost every time. I don't want anybody to misunderstand this. There are people in this world that have been wildly successful, totally focused on outcomes and objectives. And nothing mattered to them except for those things, and they laid waste to everything in between, getting there. And you can do that. When you get there, you talk about something that will be wholly unsatisfying. That will be it.
Be careful what you wish for because you might just get it.
Now think of the counterpoint to that. What if the way you went about everything mattered more than anything else? And you get there and it takes longer and it's harder and whatever else. But when you get there, you're surrounded by all these people that are like insanely grateful for what you have helped them accomplish. Which are you going to choose?
You
You
can
know?
get what you want with no regrets and a lot of blessings and gratitude, or you can get what you want surrounded by, very lonely with a bunch of regrets.
Yeah.
It's just, it's the process. Speaking of the process,
Okay.
I've committed to doing the last leg of these episodes with leave a question, ask a question. So
Okay.
I will ask you the question that my last guest I had on has for you without knowing who you were, anonymous. And their question for you, Byron, was, what do you need to change that you haven't changed yet? Fitting question for you.
What do I need to change that I haven't changed yet? I think honestly, if I were to say one thing it's not something that I haven't changed. It's just, I think it's there's a progression there, and that is to let go of judgment more. Now, we're called to and we're required to, especially in business situations, to make judgments about things. Is this the right way to go about it? Is it not the right way to go about it? And so on and so forth. That's not the type of judgment that I'm talking about. I'm talking about judgment of people. It's when you try to do your best to live a very principled life and you're trying to adhere to your own core values. There's a burning temptation, as it were, within the human psyche to look at somebody who may not be pursuing that and may not be following the same principles or values that you are, and pass judgment from on high on them. And that doesn't help. It doesn't change them, and it doesn't help you. And passing judgment on people for not following your same set of values is not what we're called to do. And it's not helpful in any way. And I think that, and I know that intellectually, I know it, I even know it in my heart, but actually following that in some cases is tough. It's tough to do. It's tough to not be judgmental about people that approach things differently, even if it literally goes counter to your values. We need to be not standing in judgment of those people that are not like us. We need to instead replace that judgmental, sort of framework and attitude with curiosity. And the curiosity is okay, I hear you. And I approach it a very different way, but tell me why you do it that way. Tell me why is that important, and why are you approaching things that way? There's an interesting little documentary that was done by a British lady named Dia Khan, and it's called White Right. And then there's another part of the title of it. It's on Netflix, I think, but you could probably look it up on the internet. White Right. I think I want to say Sleeping with the Enemy it's like something with the enemy. And she was targeted by a Nazi white supremacist group, for her journalism and reporting and stuff like that. And the authorities in Britain told her, do not leave your house. Do not go near windows. You're going to be assassinated. You're going to be executed by these people. The chatter is they are going to kill you. So what did she do? She flew to the United States and went and begged if they would meet with her. Not to convert them,
no, but to love
but
them,
to ask questions and just to listen. Radical listening.
We often hate what we don't understand, and it's hard to hate
Totally.
something from far. It's easy to hate someone from far away. It's hard to hate someone when they're right in front
from
of you.
Up close. Yeah. So 3 of the top generals, including the head poobah of this white supremacist organization, all abdicated after 2 years of her meeting with them.
It's powerful.
Not because she preached to them. She didn't preach to them at all. All she did was say, tell me why you think that. Help me understand.
She walked with them versus standing opposition to them. Now,
so if I could be more like that, If I can do that, that's where I think I've got some significant growth that I can lean into.
I think you can do it.
I
Now,
appreciate it.
what question do you have for the next guest without knowing who they are?
Question: how many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? I'm just kidding.
I thought
You
that was a metaphor, but that's a decent question.
No, it actually dates me a lot because this was a commercial for Tootsie Pops back when I was a kid, and there was an owl. He said, the somebody asked the wise old owl, how many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? And he went one, two, and then and bit into it. He said three.
I remember that commercial.
Excellent. So in more seriousness, if you were to be standing at your own funeral, what would people say about you? What would be the main things that they would say about you in your life? I think it's one of the more powerful questions to ask because I think we concern ourselves with a lot of things that in the end don't really matter that
That are
much.
temporary, material versus
Totally.
a lasting legacy, what we leave behind. It's not what you
Yeah.
take with you when you go; it's what you leave behind that matters.
Yeah.
Powerful.
Can I offer up a choice? Because there's another
Sure.
little exercise I've done with clients at times that somebody showed me a long time ago. It was really kind of funny. So, okay, on left side of the page, you get a piece of paper. You divide it with a line. On the left side of the page, I want you to just write down what you would do if you were given $10 million today, free and clear. Do anything you want with it. I want you to list out the things that you would do. Okay? And then you let them stew on that for a minute. You talk about it a little bit. And then, all right, you've just gotten notice that you have 6 months to live. Same $10 million there, unencumbered. Now what do you do with it? And compare those two.
Yeah.
It's very revealing. Did that first list really line up with things that truly matter to you? Because the quickening is the 6 months to live. And it all of a sudden changes the perspective on what it is that you're going to spend your time doing.
In Latin, it's memento vivere and memento mori. So remember you'll die, but remember to live. Byron, I had an absolute blast waxing philosophy, sharing stories, uncovering what the EOS life is meant to do, which is maximizing human potential. I think we did it. Everyone listening, I hope that we fulfilled the promise to give you valuable insights into life, liberty, pursuit of property. I don't have any ads on the show. My only ask is if you enjoyed it, share it with a friend. Byron, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ross. This was really enjoyable. I always love waxing philosophic with people.
As do I.
All right.
Take care, everyone. Be well.